Today, we're going to take a look at a really controversial 28-point peace plan for Ukraine. Now, on the surface, it seems like a way out, a path to peace, but a deep dive analysis suggests it's built on a pretty profound hidden bias. So let's get into it. To really get what's at stake here, you have to start with this quote from President Zelensky. It just perfectly lays out the impossible situation Ukraine is in. Either accept a deal that feels like a loss of dignity or risk losing a critical ally. That's the intense pressure cooker environment where this plan was born. So, what's the big takeaway from the analysis we're looking at? Well, it argues that this isn't some balanced, fair roadmap to peace. Not at all. Instead, it concludes that the plan has this deep, structural bias that, time and again, just happens to favor Russia's strategic goals. Let's break down exactly what that means, pillar by pillar. All right, first up, territory. And this is a big one. The plan doesn't just talk about freezing the front lines where they are. Nope. According to the analysis, it's about fundamentally redrawing the map in a way that actually rewards the initial invasion. Just look at the specifics here. It's not just about formalizing what Russia already controls. The plan would actually force Ukraine to hand over territory its soldiers are currently, right now, defending. Think about that. Giving up ground you never lost in a fight, and, maybe most importantly, giving Russia that permanent land bridge to Crimea it's wanted for so long. Now, to understand the military side of this, we've got to talk about something called the fortress belt. This is not just a line on a map, okay? It's this massive, incredibly complex defensive system, trenches, bunkers, minefields, that Ukraine has spent almost a decade building. It is the absolute backbone of their defense in the east. So what happens if Ukraine gives that up? Well, the analysis doesn't mince words. It calls it a strategic catastrophe. Why? Because it would essentially hand Russia a massive military advantage for nothing, leaving Ukraine incredibly vulnerable and giving Moscow the perfect springboard for another attack down the road. Okay, on to the second pillar, the security arrangements. If you thought the territory part was one-sided, the analysis argues that this part of the deal isn't just unbalanced, it's completely lopsided. Let's just start with this number, 280,000. That's how many soldiers the analysis says Ukraine would be forced to cut from its current fighting force. It would slash their army from about 880,000 down to a cap of 600,000. We're talking about a massive, forced demobilization in the middle of a war for survival. And this slide, wow, it just lays the whole thing out, clear as day. Look at the left column. For Ukraine, you have hard, verifiable, permanent limits. They have to literally change their constitution to forbid joining NATO. They have to accept caps on troops, on weapons. Now, look at the right. What are Russia's obligations? They're expected not to invade. They have to pass a domestic law they could just repeal tomorrow. There are no outside checks, no caps, no real restrictions at all. This table really just puts it all together, doesn't it? You can see the pattern so clearly. For Ukraine, every single provision is a concrete loss of land, of defense, of sovereignty. And for Russia, every single provision is a win, achieving a major strategic goal. It's a really stark picture of what the analysis calls a deeply unbalanced deal. All right, pillar number 3. Here, we're shifting gears a little, from military strategy to international law. And this is where we get into the really explosive issue of amnesty and accountability for war crimes. You know, this part of the plan forces us to ask a really profound and uncomfortable question. Can a political agreement just wipe the slate clean? Can a peace deal really just erase accountability for alleged war crimes? And the draft plan is pretty blunt about it. Point 26 spells it out right there. It grants full amnesty to all parties. Just notice how sweeping that language is. Legal experts cited in the analysis say this is basically a blanket attempt to grant impunity for even the most serious international crimes. And a clause like this, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It's a direct challenge to the work of the International Criminal Court, which has already issued arrest warrants, including one for Vladimir Putin himself. The analysis argues this provision is basically designed to hand Moscow a complete get-out-of-jail-free card on the world stage, neutralizing any and all international justice efforts. So, our final pillar looks at how this whole thing would be enforced. And this is where, according to the analysis, things get really weird, with a set of unconventional rules and a financial structure that seems tailor-made to do one thing: reward Moscow and put the screws to Kyiv. The plan proposes creating this peace council, but this is not your typical diplomatic body. The analysis points out it would be led by a single person, not a country, and this one person would be given the power to impose international sanctions, a power usually reserved for the UN Security Council, and the whole thing would operate completely outside of any established legal frameworks. It's unusual. And the unconventional stuff doesn't stop there. It goes right to the money. Take a look at this number, 50%. That's the profit share the U.S. would reportedly claim from investing frozen Russian assets to rebuild Ukraine. And apparently this detail completely blindsided European allies, who, by the way, are holding most of those frozen assets. This chart just sums up the whole enforcement mechanism perfectly. It's all about carrots and sticks. For Moscow, it is all carrots. Sanctions get lifted, they get invited back into the G8, there are huge economic incentives. And for Kyiv, it's all sticks, the constant threat of losing vital U.S. support or facing new sanctions for any tiny violation. So, you take these four pillars, the rewarding of conquest, the lopsided security deal, the promise of impunity, and the coercive enforcement, and you put them all together. What do you get? Well, the analysis concludes the risk is much, much bigger than just Ukraine. It threatens the entire international order. It all comes down to one question. What kind of precedent does this set? The analysis boils it all down to three huge systemic risks. First, it legitimizes conquest. It sends a message that, yeah, taking territory by force works. Second, it institutionalizes impunity, basically creating a playbook for powerful countries to get away with war crimes. And third, by leaving Ukraine so weakened, it all but guarantees future aggression. And that brings us to the final, critical question that this analysis leaves us with. If a peace plan prioritizes just ending a conflict, any conflict, over upholding the basic principles of international law and justice, what kind of world does that create? What kind of precedent does that set for all of us?